It is week 2. I've had an interesting week so far. Getting into the swing of things again, which is really great. It's boring, he says. His little body sprawled out on the carpet, kicking his feet restlessly, his hands tucked under his head as if he were laid back on the beach, taking a vacation. Taking a vacation from education. Just the opposite effect I was intending, I think to myself as I crouched down beside him, trying not to make a scene amongst the rest of the students. The class was working jubilantly together in groups that I had selected, save for this rogue dissenter. Why is it boring? I ask, in an attempt to understand, hoping he'll somehow give me a straight answer. And I didn't get it. All I wanted was for my students to explore their space, the way their bodies can move, and how music can influence their behavior and therefore bring about a diverse range of characters through their body. So this proved a more challenging task than I had anticipated. The students were trying, I have to give them credit, but often I witnessed a lot of carbon copies of friends in class and general goofing off with classmates. This, of course, is typical. It's grade 4 and 5. What do you expect? That's behavior. That's okay. But what probably bothered me more was the carbon copies of movement, doing what a friend is doing and not finding their own space. They're constantly checking in with their peers. And at this age, I was a little surprised about that, and it kind of upset me a little bit. Just saddened me a bit. I just started thinking to myself, cannot these students in the beginning stage of their lives have the naivete and maybe the bravery of spirit so early on to create some movement of their own without peer influence? Peer influence is quite strong. And if you think of Vygotsky's theories of learning, he has a theory of social interaction. And the theory is that social interaction between peers and learning happens first, and then it happens on the individual level. And definitely at this age level, that seems to be really prevalent. Maybe there are more factors at play than merely being creative or not creative, and this is what I started to come to over the course of my reflection on this. My little friend was not active in the movement, but rather he seemed to be really enthralled with the videos that I was playing with my musical selections on the laptop, and I tried to keep this hidden from the group, but he found it and he was checking it out. So it also occurred to me that this child may not be kinesthetically inclined, but more so visually and linguistically inclined. I had made an assumption that because he was always busy and active, he was constantly fidgety at his desk, never really able to sit for too long during direct instruction, always had something in his hands, was playing around. I thought that this would be a good match for him, this type of activity, and that it would interest him. So we moved on. I tried to match up students that I think will work well together because they'll help keep each other focused, and stronger students will help weaker students and the like. So each group had a piece of paper. They would pick it. It had an emotion on it, joy, sadness, fear, as an example. And then they would take a piece of material, and their task was to create a movement presenting that emotion without using voice. So this is where my little rogue reared his head. Perhaps it was the group selection, but the girls he was asked to work with, I observed, were being very inclusive. They were asking his opinion on how they should present, what they'd like, what he'd like to do, and he just had little interest. He just shut down, essentially. I didn't want to force him to get involved because that's counter to my intentions with this activity and integrating creative exploration in the classroom. You have to create a safe environment. Forcing students to do something in that way is really counterintuitive. It got me thinking that perhaps there's more at play than just him finding it boring. So I considered going back to barriers. What could some of his barriers be? So I considered maybe it's fear of being wrong, fear of being yelled at, fear of maybe not being heard despite his voice. He's the youngest sibling. That happens sometimes. Perhaps the emotion anger is something that he's all too familiar with elsewhere in his life. And he just couldn't articulate that with me. I reminded myself that I am the teacher, which is a good thing to do. The best I could come up with in that moment was to give him a choice. He could participate with the group or write a reflective answer based on the content of our lessons. And admittedly, it was an intentionally very dry and difficult question for the age level. So I gave him that choice, and he chose to do the question. What can you do? But I did come to a few conclusions through this exercise and what I observed. Number one, given the age of the students, the earlier the students are introduced to creative play, this is what I've come to, and creative exploration, maybe the more readily they will be able to handle individual work and exploration, especially as they get older and develop as students. Clear expectations are necessary. Practice, practice, practice. I already noticed that working with them and getting into routine with them, I'm now at week 2, as they get familiar with me and familiar with the expectations, so too will their security level grow, and they will feel comfortable enough to maybe try things on their own a little bit more. So I also realize then that structure does have its value.